There is too much to say about Dark Souls 2 that I do not even know where to start. That is, in fact, a lie. Here's what people are saying about the game. The best part is that those were just DS1 and DS3 reviews, not actually DS2 reviews. Here are the actual Dark Souls 2 reviews. And to those who still thinks this game is a bad game, unbalanced and with bad hitboxes, here's what I have to say. Get good. Dark Souls 2 is a tale about the undead curse, about stagnation, about the journey and the meaning of choices. It is in fact an incredible game, from start to finish, and I'm pretty sure it's gonna leave a mark on you. Still, it is far from being perfect. There are various issues, both in the finished product and in its development history, which I'm not gonna dwell into. Mechanically, it is experimental. It tries things that not any other soul from softwares tries to. Sometimes it succeeds, other times it fails. To pay homage to the game, this video has been cutted, edited, and remodeled multiple times in a completely unwanted procedure, just like Dark Souls 2. I personally hated Dark Souls 2. Scholar of the First Sin has always been a grudge to me to come back to. And if possible, I always tried to avoid another gameplay of this title. Even when suggesting friends new to the series, I always tried to dissuade them from playing the game. It was not until I ended up in a debate with this friend of mine, which you are going to hear, that I found myself not knowing why I hated Dark Souls 2 that much. Or maybe I didn't remember. The last time I played it was back in 2017, and I did not touch it since then. So, naturally, I decided to play it once more. While I would play the vanilla version, my friend would play instead the Scholar version. This to be on both even grounds when facing the game, because I already played the Scholar one. So this is where I should start telling you a very long and boring list of things that are equal to disequal, to balancing, to mechanics, to really, we don't need to do that. A lot of other channels have already covered the differences between Scholar and Vanilla. We're not doing that. We are taking the elevator from Earthen Peak to the Iron Keep, and we're gonna jump right to the discussion. This video is structured like a dialogue between me and this friend of mine. a veteran to a newcomer. What follows are our own experiences about the game. A veteran playing it again, and a poor virgin soul playing the best version of Dark Souls 2. Let us begin.
Dark Souls 2 is a game.
Okay. Let us start with the presentation, William. What is your relationship with the franchise?
So, I only recently got into the world of From Software RPGs. Last year I played Bloodborne, then a couple months ago I bought Dark Souls Trilogy to dwell into From Software's Magnus Opera. While playing Dark Souls 1, I knew that an infamous and terrible monster was waiting for me to be tamed. A legendary beast whom dangerousness and brutality could easily frighten even the ancient dragons and minors. Its name was Dark Souls 2, Scholar of the First Sin.
So, its reputation definitely precedes it.
Anyway, I finished Dark Souls 1 and I was really excited about the lore and the story. So, in spite of its bad reputation, I started Dark Souls 2 really hyped. And my mind was like, come on, how bad can it really be? And after finishing it, I must declare that I was right. Dark Souls 2 is a good game. A very good game. The least strong title of the trilogy, but still a very good game.
Yes, in fact, Dark Souls 2 has an amazing story. One that can leave behind what was already been said in Dark Souls 1 and build upon something new, entirely and surely. That is one of the reasons it gets so much hate from the community. If it was called Dark Souls, Distant Lands, or maybe dropping Dark Souls name entirely and being its own individual thing, it would have been perceived differently. The 2 brings with itself a stigma that Dark Souls 2 doesn't really live up to. For sure, it is an incredible story. It is one worth telling, and you only could have done it in a game like this. But being the successor of Dark Souls 1, some sort of expectation starts together. It is in fact an incredible soul, but maybe not the Dark Soul people wanted it to be. So, let's start by mentioning some mechanics, shall we?
Yes, in fact, I want to start from what I consider to be objective flaws in the game. So, as I started my playthrough, I felt that something was terribly wrong. The character literally moves like he shitted his pants, clunky, heavy, and awkward. You really feel the weight in every step, especially with two-handed weapons like halberds. It gets even worse when the character stiffens up like a race walker with a locked torso. This is all thanks to the motion capture, which honestly just sucks. No debate here, it's an objective flaw. Another objective flaw, adaptability. On paper, it makes very sense. A stat that improves dodging, healing speed, and defensive mechanics. In practice, it's garbage. Instead of feeling like a normal base stat, it feels like a handicap you're forced to level up just to make the gameplay like it should. Other stats make the game easier when leveled up. Adaptability just makes it functional. That's bad design. And then we have the worst part of Dark Souls 2, the weapon movesets. In Dark Souls 1 and Dark Souls 3, weapons feel unique, giving you tons of combat variety. Dark Souls 2 movesets are copy-pasted across weapon classes, even for boss weapons. Finding out the Fume Knight's sword plays exactly like the Pursuer's was straight up depressing. This is easily one of the game's biggest failures.
I see. Personally speaking, I don't mind the same moveset over and over, but I definitely agree on the adaptability point. I mean, you could beat the game without ever leveling it up and just get better at dodging in a smaller window frame, but I totally see where you're coming from. And what about subjective flaws?
So, Dark Souls 2 feels more like a dungeon crawler than a true Souls game. I like Dark Souls 1 and Dark Souls 3, which have almost entirely diegetic gameplay, Dark Souls 2 introduces mechanics purely for gameplay's sake. This isn't necessarily bad. Indeed, some features, like the bonfire aesthetic, are what games the game great, but others just straight up frustrating. I call these subjective flaws because while they annoyed me, I can see how some players might enjoy them. A big one is enemy placement. Scar the First Sin especially cranks this up to ridiculous levels. There are areas where you can't take 2 steps without being swarmed, leaving you no real escape. Iron Keep before Smelter Demon, a nightmare. The DLC multiplayer areas, worse. The path to Blue Smelter Demon is just a corridor, stuffed with random enemies whose only purpose is to piss you off. But since Dark Souls 2 leans into dungeon crawler territory, I can't call it an objective flaw. It makes sense in that context. To counterbalance the enemy spam, Dark Souls 2 introduced a mechanic where enemies stop respawning after 12 kills. A lot of people hated this, but honestly, with how bad the enemy placement is, it felt necessary. It's one of those so bad it's so good mechanics, it only exists to fix another bad design choice. Then there's the bosses. Dark Souls 2 has a ton of bosses, but most of them are forgettable. Every Souls game has some duds, Champion Grave Tender, Centipede Demon, Earthlight, etc. But Dark Souls 2 has way too many. The ratio of great to bad bosses is much worse than in other games. And even the best ones, Fume Knight, Ceralon, Vestad, Pursuer, don't quite hit the legendary status of Ornstein and Smough or Soul of Cinder. That's because in Dark Souls 2, bosses aren't the main event. They're just another obstacle in the dungeon crawler formula. A lot of them feel repetitive, gimmicky, or just there.
Yeah, Dark Souls introduces new mechanics and shenanigans that are meant to help you most of the times, and its areas are very different from one another. You can really immerse yourself in an incredible and stunning experience, world building with a lot of things to try and to play with: the torch mechanic, the fire of stones, the ascetic bonfires, the curse that affects your life every time you die, the slow head regen given you by the Estus flask that makes you use more resources of healing, like the reddened stones, and so on and so forth. Still, not every mechanic really works as nice as intended, and sometimes you get very frustrated about them. Some areas can be considered unfair if approached too much in a rush. You do not get high frames when editing reposts and some other animations, so one criticism usually is that you need to clear the areas before a boss fight every time, and I can see why it is considered clunky and frustrating. But honestly speaking, with some specific cases, I guess it is just a skill issue. Honestly, replaying vanilla, I almost found it easier in some aspect, but in parallel Scholar of the First Sin run, I've encountered some major roadblock of personal skill issues. What about the good?
Alright, I've talked enough about the flaws. Time to highlight what really makes Dark Souls 2 a great game. Drunken's world, while not as interconnected as Dark Souls 1's, is still beautifully crafted. The landscapes are breathtaking, with areas that feel truly majestic. Majula is probably the best hub in any Souls game, bathed in sunlight, waves crashing in the distance, giving off a mix of peace and melancholia. The Dragon Eyrie, one of the most incredible locations in the series, a vast, endless horizon that perfectly captures the grandeur of dragons in Dark Souls lore. Then you have top-tier areas like Hyde's Tower of Flame, Shrine of Amana, and Alien Blois. The only real issue is that you never feel like you are actually traveling across a massive world. Drangleic is supposed to be huge, maybe even continent-sized, but the game never gives you that sense of scale. Being able to teleport from the start doesn't help either. Still, the world design is solid. Now let's talk about the god of mechanics, the bonfire aesthetics. It's actually tragic that the best mechanic in the entire series is stuck in Dark Souls 2, the worst title of the series. Why, Miyazaki? Why didn't you keep this in Dark Souls 3? I know I usually prefer the eject mechanics, but screw that, this is just too good. One of the worst things about Souls game is having to replay the entire game just to refight a boss you liked. Bonfire settings let you force New Game Plus in a single area without resetting everything else. It's pure genius and makes Dark Souls 2 way more replayable. Miyazaki not bringing it back, a crime. Forget Deus Ex Machina, this is Machina Ex Deus.
Damn, you're almost reading my mind. To be honest, as an architect, I really love what they did with architecture and landscapes. My favorite places are Hyde, Forest of the Fallen Giant, and obviously Majula. We all love Majula. It is definitely one of the best hubs ever designed, and it emanates a calm feeling that you can always return to after being obliterated by areas and bosses.
So, as a veteran of this series, what's your take on the lore?
So, the story of Dark Souls 2 is unique in both its simplicity and its place within the universe. To truly appreciate it, you almost have to set aside the events of the first game and even ignore the fact that a third one already exists. It's best experienced as if it were a world unto itself, a distant echo of a place you once visited, familiar yet distorted by time and legend. I love the human nature of this game. It is supposed to be a forgotten kingdom during the eras of stagnation. And my personal favorite characters were Vendrick and the Ivory King. But I know that you were seeking answer to a lot of questions joining this game. Did it meet your expectation?
I know why you are asking that. Many people dislike Dark Souls 2's story, calling it too apocryphal or a loose reinterpretation of the established Dark Souls mythos. Personally, I think its lore is great. One of the best stories ever told in the series, even though, like any Souls game, it has its issues that still need unpacking. More than just a good story, Dark Souls 2 presents a compelling take on the entire Dark Souls universe. In Dark Souls 1, humanity is a central theme, yet it remains obscured, almost hidden. The very thing that gives the game its title, the Dark Soul, is explicitly mentioned only once, in an easily missable sacred dialogue. This ties directly into the game's main idea. Humanity possesses the most powerful force in the world, yet the gods fear it and manipulate us into believing we are weak. The history of Dark Souls is, in essence, a tale of gods gaslighting mankind, convincing us that our darkness, our emotions, imperfections, passions, rage, love, and irrationality are things to be ashamed of. The gods, led by Gwyn, seek a world of perfect rational order, cleansing it of the chaos that humanity represents. As a result, humanity's role in the first game's narrative is deliberately shrouded, its truths buried beneath the grandeur of the gods, who remain the dominant figures of the story. Dark Souls 2, however, flips this entirely. The gods are barely mentioned, their influence long faded. The most powerful beings in this world are not divine, but human. Vendrick, Velstad, Nashandra, Aldia, Raim, the Old Kings. Here, the dark is not just present, it is the very force that shapes the narrative. The remnants of Manus have taken on new forms, manifesting as the fragmented embodiments of the Dark Souls envy, fear, squalor, sorrow. This is a world no longer ruled by gods. Their thrones have been abandoned, and humanity has taken their place.
So, we could talk about the lore and the mechanics the whole day, literally. If you take all of the channels that talk about gameplay, cut content, lore, and so on and so forth, we would need definitely more time. So I'm gonna conclude our conversation with a question, which already I'm gonna answer. Do you think that in the year 2025 Dark Souls 2 has a place? Does it fill some needs? Is it for everyone? What is its legacy? In my opinion, Dark Souls 2 has a place. Not the best Souls, but as a cautionary tale of a game with a lot of potential that kind of loses it in its sight, in the midst of its own creation. I do not think it is for everyone, definitely not the ones who search answers from Dark Souls 1, and also not for the one who are in a hurry. Dark Souls 2 is an incredible game with a lot of beautiful moments where you can just stand there and absorb the scenery. It is a shame that its reputation precedes it. I do not think is totally deserved, even with those questionable mechanics. Its legacy is one of the most experimental Souls game, one that even Elden Ring, in my opinion, has taken a lot of inspiration from. Sadly, nobody likes the ascetic bonfire enough.
Personally, I couldn't agree more with you. Dark Souls 2 is not for everyone, and it's a shame that even after all this time it is preceded by this terrible reputation. Even if I consider it to be the weakest of From Software Souls games, it still is a game far better than any Souls-like of any other video game company. If I were to put all of the From Software Souls-like titles in a tier list, all of the other ones would get a S tier ranking, while Dark Souls 2 would get a strong A ranking. Probably the best not From Software Souls-like title would get a C or a B ranking. So, in conclusion, I think that Dark Souls 2 in 2025 stands out as a game for those who like the Souls game format, but at the same time are searching for something a little bit more playful and a little less diegetic. As I said, a Souls that looks a lot like a dungeon crawler with a lot of arcade mechanics.
In a conclusion, these were more of a dialogue on the game than actual analysis, from a newcomer to a veteran. I think people that hate Dark Souls 2 are just bad at the game, and they do not accept that they are the problem. Yes, it is indeed a flawed game in some way, but even Dark Souls 1 is flawed, and even Elden Ring had to cut corners. It is an experimental game from a point in time where this reality could still be a possibility. I do not think From is gonna take any more leaps in judgment concerning future title, even though I would like to see something like that. With that being said, thank you for watching this narration about Dark Souls 2. And yeah, that's the end of it.